If you haven't been able to tell already, I'm one of the few people giving Elite 2.0 maybe a little bit more love than they deserve. I'm the kind of person, I see a challenge and I like to tackle it head on. My latest little project involves the latest generation of the Nerf Night Finder, better known as the Elite 2.0 Volt. This thing is hitting pretty freaking hard with very, very minimal mods. What do you say we go over what's been done? Let's get into it. Alright guys, believe it or not, the parts we need to add to this mod are very minimal. This blaster has more restrictions already on it than restrictions of modability. To explain that better, some blasters allow you to replace almost every single part very, very easily. These blasters are a little bit more proprietary. There's not a lot of parts that interchange with the prior generation, such as the Fire Strike and the Night Finder. This blaster has built-in restrictions that we can remove easily to be able to benefit from its already decent components. For example, the spring on this blaster feels just like the Fire Strike spring, has pretty good tension. I honestly don't feel a need to replace this right away. Obviously in the performance test, we'll see just how good it is once we have achieved a brass seal and all that. For the most part, the blaster is surprisingly pretty modular once you get inside. Now, the metal spudger is still going to be your best friend for opening this blaster. A metal spudger for getting inside any kind of solvent welded blaster is pretty essential. Now, surprisingly, this blaster did not have any solvent welding at all. It only had clips and a large variety of them all over the edges of the blaster. The key here is you want to pry evenly all around the blaster. You don't want to concentrate in one area and just keep prying, because then that's going to put extra stress on the opposite side. If you keep prying evenly across the blaster, that's going to allow you to be able to pop it open faster than you think. Once the blaster is open, these components were very surprisingly modular. The barrel came off of the plunger tube pretty easily just by slightly lifting on these two ears. Be careful not to lift too hard or you can pry them off. And then after that, it was very straightforward. The AR sits inside this little chamber, just like any other blaster we've seen. And then the AR spring seat is built into this area of the plunger tube with, of course, a spring that sits on it. I would start with a 3/8 drill bit right down the center here to remove the dart post, and that's that. So as far as tool goes, you're not going to need a screwdriver. You're literally just going to need a metal spudger. I'm going to be removing the electronics, the gray parts and the orange parts, because I'm going to custom paint these shells. But as far as the rest of the project, it's pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to drill out this dart post. We're going to drill the barrel bore to 17/32. We're going to go ahead and check performance when all this is done with the stock spring. And if we feel like we can get a little bit more, we're going to try out a little bit of a stronger spring, maybe an Apollo string or something. We'll figure it out once we get there. But for now, let's get these parts modded and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, guys, our brass barrel is installed. I actually decided to keep the air restrictor. It's actually a pretty good design when you study the physics behind it. The good thing about it is that the actual air restrictor contactor itself is going to rest on the brass. Another thing you could do optionally, I went ahead and did it. You can get a 732 drill bit, kind of just lightly carve away some of the brass so that the edges of the brass are angled towards the dart. That'll increase aerodynamic airflow into the back of the dart. It's little things that add to the overall performance, since we're kind of basically leaving the blaster stock except for adding brass. Another thing, and this applies to Night Finders and Fire Strikes, the LED that Hasbro chose for this is a very, very dim red LED. I mean, it barely functions well for a laser imitation pointer as far as illumination goes, but it's totally terrible as a light itself. So what I decided to do is I got another LED that's actual white in color. So this should not only provide much more better illumination, but it's actually going to serve as a mini flashlight for the blaster, which I think is a lot more efficient way of using that power rather than just using a halfway laser pointer. So I'm going to desolder this LED and I'm going to solder in this LED. That should make for a nice little cool electronic add-on aesthetic mod to this blaster. And it will be functional too. Let's get to it. All right, guys, the new LED has been soldered in, as you can see. Let me zoom in a little bit for you, since I know the magnifying post-processing doesn't really capture all the details. So it's a surface mount LEDs. Now all we're going to do is we're going to test it just to make sure it works. There you go, guys. Switch is on. You can already see how bright that LED can be. With this little magnifier, it will be even better. So I'm really excited for that. Now we're just going to basically clip these little LED leads to make it nice and flush fit. And we got a new lighting system on our Volt. That's the original LED. They're very, very dim LEDs. Happy to have this new mod in place, guys. What do you say? We put our Volt back together now. Let's get it. All right, guys, our brass barrel Elite 2.0 Volt is complete, fitted with a nice new bright white LED versus the original dim red one. You guys know me, I'm really big on barrel protection. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna get the quad barrel assembly of one of those Clash Combats that you always see thrifting. This is gonna become useful because we're gonna use this sleeve to fit over the brass barrel, and then a sleeve sleeve of 3/4 inch 70-75 aluminum tubing to fit over that. And that's going to provide us not only with a nice performance barrel look, but it's also going to protect our brass barrel. I see so many enthusiasts running around with just their barrel hanging out. This barrel gets canted or nicked in any kind of way that affects their dart flight, it's over. You got to rebuild a new blaster. And I don't want you guys to have to go through that. What we're going to do is basically cut this AR assembly off. So we're going to end up with 4 potential barrel protectors for future blaster projects that we have. And then we're going to proceed to put our aluminum end fitting on. Basically the aluminum shell with a plastic cushioning in between the brass and the aluminum. This also will prevent dissimilar metal corrosion, something that commonly happens when different types of metal touch each other. You never want brass touching steel or aluminum touching steel or any kind of metal in general touching any other kind of metal. Gonna cut these ARs apart and come back with one of them to fit into this barrel. Let's get to it, guys. All right, guys, our plastic coupler has been inserted into the aluminum. Everything's been cleaned up. I did some brush polish on it, and basically all you have to do now is just press fit it all the way back, and there you go. You have your brass protected by your polymer piece and the aluminum outer tube to back it up. Now that's a sharp looking pistol right there. Just a few more coats of this white paint pen to bring that volt back, and then we're gonna hit the range and see what this baby can do. Mind you, all components are stock spring, stock plunger, even has the air restrictor in it. Keep that in mind. Whatever number we're gonna get right now is strictly a cause of removing the dart post and adding sealed brass. Let's get to it, guys. In the air tonight, take over your mind, let it hypnotize. Feel it in your skin, slowly it begins, like a drug so high. All right, guys, so we ended up glue filling our plunger head. We upgraded to an Apollo/Helios spring. This is about an 8 or 9 pound spring. It's a really, really nice spring. It's about the same length as the original, so we won't have any catch problem. Time to put this blaster back together and see what kind of performance we get. 2 minor updates. One of the little upgrades that I love doing, especially on these Alpha Strike and Elite 2.0 blasters that don't have a plunger head O-ring, is to shrink wrap some battery heat shrink around the head after I glue fill the center. This adds an extra layer of seal. When your plunger slams forward, you're getting the maximum amount of air. None of the air is actually escaping towards the rear of the plunger tube through the head. Another thing I wanted to tackle, the electronics. So we already did replace the LED. However, the wiring on this blaster, this circuit is very flimsy. I believe this is a 22 or 24 gauge wire. In fact, in one of the instances where I was taking the blaster apart, the wires came loose. So I'm going to go ahead and upgrade to a 18 gauge. I think this is going to be better, and I'm going to give us a little bit more slack on the wiring. I'm going to desolder these wires. I'm going to resolder the new wires in, and then we're going to put our blaster back together so we can do our final performance test. Let's get it. All right, guys, our new lighting wire harness is in. Nice secure fit. Now we're going to fit these parts to the blaster. Harness fits nice and tucked in without any issues. And we're going to go to the mini range and test out the performance with our new upgraded reinforced plunger system, removed AR, and upgraded spring. Let's get to it. Now, one cool feature I want to add about removing the AR, you no longer have to ramrod your darts as long as you put a dart seat on your 7/32 brass barrel end, which I did. I put about 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch brass sleeved into the 17/32 right at the end so that the darts seat. So basically all you got to do is just go back on the prime, the darts all the way in the back of the breech, and bang. Works with short darts too. That's it, guys. I've heard all kinds of things about this blaster, like they don't have O-rings so they're not real plungers, or they're underpowered because they got weak springs. I've heard it all. As you can see, I literally just added a 4-inch brass barrel. I carved out any excess plastic that can get in the way of airflow on the back of the barrel. Just with that stock plunger and stock spring, we're getting some serious triple-digit short dart and traditional dart speeds. There's absolutely no concern of mine that I could take this out to the war and use it as a worthy tertiary or even probably a good sharpshooting secondary. vary. If you found this information informative, I'd appreciate it if you could hit the like button so we can spread the word to some people that perhaps don't have access to one of the older Night Finders or Fire Strikes and they'd like to mod their Volt. It's not an impossible thing to do. I would love the idea that this is helpful to somebody. But with that said, I hope to catch you on the next one. Stay blasted, foam fam.